Hi, Malek.
Hi Farzan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
Great, great.
Good.
So we've heard so much about 1 to 10 and then I've played it. It's an incredible game. I got a
Mhm.
lot out of it, honestly. So I thought we'd take a chance to sit down, ask you a few questions, get to kind of the root of how it came about.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So maybe first off, tell us how did this idea come to you? Where did it come from and how did it originate?
So, I did not set out to develop a game. Let's start with that. What I set out to do was to have um, meaningful conversations with the people around me that I was friends with, close friends with, and I wanted to have more substantial conversations than the ones that we were having. And I had a few friends over, and kind of in a moment of frustration, I was asking questions, and I was getting stories back or anecdotes. And in a moment of frustration, I just decided, okay, stop with the storytelling and give me a number on a scale from 1 to 10. How much does this idea or um, belief resonate with you? How much do you think it is who you are? And give me a number on a scale from 1 to 10. So I ripped up these little pieces of paper, and everyone circled a number for themselves. And then I thought, at the same time, I thought, well, wait a second, I've got a number for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked everyone to write a number for me and for everyone else. And in that moment, I could see that all of a sudden there was a shift in our conversations, and we were having the conversations I wanted to have
A more
about,
focused conversation.
yeah, a more focused conversation about identity, self, our beliefs, our relationships, who we are. And yeah, that was really the moment. It was a spontaneous experience, and I could see that I was onto something. So I began from there to develop the game.
Makes sense. So so as you brought this game then to your friends, to others, are there any interesting stories that emerged in those early experiences?
Well, I could see very quickly that people were interested in playing. Um, my obviously my initial pilot group was with my friends, and so the my initial take on it was that people really enjoyed playing it. I learned so much about the people around me that I didn't really know. I mean, it
Mhm.
completely steered the conversations that we were having from, I mean, I don't want to say that it eliminated small talk. I mean, I think there's a space for, catching up on the thises and that's, but it really cleared a path to have um, um, really deep conversations, and I could see that was happening, and
Mhm.
so I continued to prototype the game and develop it from there.
And did those experiences change the course of the game at all? Did it shift direction at all, or was it
Well,
pretty much right?
absolutely. No, 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 absolutely. So I had certain ideas. I had a very strong set of kind of explorations that I was doing personally with myself. These were questions that I was asking myself about who am I, and how do I, what is my relationship to my relationships, and what is my relationship to kind of the world as a whole. So I had a core set of questions, but my friends definitely helped inform, add questions and inform and clarify. I mean, what they really helped me do was clarify what I wanted these questions to really ask
Mhm.
or not ask. There's a lot of space in these questions for interpretation, and that's part of the game. Part of the game is saying, well, what do you mean by things like loyalty, or what do you mean, what does being patient mean for you? So I could tune the game, yeah, to apply to to the people that I knew really well, and that's the approach that I took.
Sure. And there are a lot of questions. You have them in these separate categories, but I'm sure it must have taken a while to kind of accrue all these different insightful
Yeah,
questions.
it did, and I'm still in the process of collecting questions. I mean, the search for meaning and the search for understanding continues on. Initially, I set out to create one game, but I could quickly see that these games kind of, or that the questions and the conversation kind of lent itself to three different types of games. There were kind of games, there were kind of questions about the world around us, about kind of the spiritual world, you know, your beliefs about religion, or as I put it, the invisible forces that guide our lives. There were questions about the self, the individual, and then our relationship to our relationships. So I set out with one game in mind, but quickly I could see there were actually three distinct games here, and of course they overlap as well.
Hmm.
I mean, there's no hard and fast break between these things. We're integrated um, human beings. We're integrated people, and
Absolutely.
so they overlap as well.
I'll share an experience of my own. We had a weekend where my ex-wife and stepdaughter were in town, and my wife joined us. We rented a little cabin, and we pulled out the relationship deck. And what was shocking to me was these are the people I'm closest to in the world, that I presume I know best in the world. And yet, it's like you say, the information that was coming out and the things that they were sharing, many of those were things I didn't know about these
Yeah,
people. I
yeah.
found that really remarkable.
I can tell you the other side of the coin too. I didn't just play the game with my friends because obviously I felt like there might be a bias there. I took early prototypes of the games to bars and to events, and I played with absolute strangers
Hmm.
because I wanted to see what the effect was on people I didn't know. Now, obviously, the gameplay is geared towards people that know you, that can give you feedback on yourself, and you can provide feedback. But what was surprising to me was when I took it out and played it with absolute strangers, the amount of information they would quickly share with you about themselves, their lives, their relationships. It just seemed to immediately kind of disarm them, and you could have really in-depth conversations with people that you wouldn't otherwise know or even have those types of conversations with. You would just
Hmm.
be, you would just have very superficial conversations about the weather or sports or that sort of thing. You flip a card and all of a sudden you're really learning about people. So that was surprising to me as well. I could see it had legs at that point too.
Yeah, and you evolved a little different way of playing the game when you did that, right? It's more of a
Yeah.
conversation starter versus sort of the whole
Yeah.
scoring system.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, the game is designed to be played with your close friends because they know you best, and you can give feedback anonymously and get feedback anonymously, and you can really begin to reflect on yourself. There's so much wisdom around you, but there are other modalities to play the game. Like I said, if you curate the deck, and I've done this many times, and I know others have as well. I mean, you can take the deck, curate it down to cards that are appropriate to talk about, and you
Hmm.
can go on a date or you can go to a bar and you can just flip a card and say, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does this card represent who you are, what you believe? And 9 out of 10 people are just really willing to play and want to connect and
Yeah.
share that kind of information. So it's not something I advertise. It's not the the way I present the deck or the
Hmm.
game, but yeah, it's a lot of fun for kind of first dates and just initial meetings to kind of cut to the chase, past the pleasantries, and get really to the heart of like who you are and
Yeah.
what you believe in.
That's powerful. I mean, for those of us that are more introverted to not have that awkward silence, right? To sort of have
Yeah,
something to immediately create some sense of connection.
yeah,
It's very
absolutely.
powerful. So as you've been going on this journey with 1 to 10, and then has it changed your perspectives, or has your experience of life changed in meaningful ways?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I've learned a ton about the people around me. I think they have learned. I It has certainly cultivated my desire to get to know people really
Hmm.
deeply. I think while I'm certainly able and capable of having, more small talk conversations, but I really want to know people. I'm generally interested in their lives, and what what motivates them, what beliefs they have, what ideas they have, and so to some degree it's reinforced my faith in humanity that we're all on a journey, that
Hmm.
but it's not easy to kind of connect on that level with people initially, and I think a game like this kind of disarms that and says, "Are
Agree.
you on a journey too?" And most of us are like, "Yeah, absolutely. We're
Yeah.
experiencing this thing, and let's have those conversations."
What I like too is in a lot of sort of open discussions, somebody's going to dominate the conversation. You have the big personalities, and you have the people that sit back a little, the more the observers, and this brings everybody to the fore, right?
Yeah,
Establishes a kind of equality, right, as we go around.
yeah. It creates space for everyone to talk too. Yeah, to your point. I mean, in the way that the game is played, I mean, you give yourself a score from 1 to 10 on, for instance, I have this question here from the relationship deck. Um, on a scale from 1 to 10, I am patient with my partner.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we tend to have ideas for ourselves, if you were to ask me, am I patient? I would say, yeah, of course I'm patient. But the game forces you to pick a number from 1 to 10, and then to provide a number to your partner. And this is where the and then portion of the game comes up. You get to explain kind of your
Hmm.
number for yourself, and then others get to explain kind of their take on you. So there is that equal space, right? You give space and you're granted space to talk, and I think that's the power of the game, is really in the and then portion of the game where people get to express themselves. And you're right, you get to hear from people that might otherwise be quiet, or leave space for a more dominant personality to kind of express themselves. There's no, as I've said, there's no escaping kind of hard truths
Hmm.
in this game, and I think that's where you know the material and for good conversations and depth really comes from.
Yeah, and that one I think illustrates how you might get very different answers from different people, right?
Yeah,
I can imagine many of my friends, coworkers, for example, might rate me really high on patience, where
right,
my wife sees a different side of me, right?
right.
A closer side that's a lot more impatient, if we're being honest, right?
Yeah, yeah, we tend to give ourselves, I mean, the cards differ, but like on a question like that, I mean, we tend to give ourselves high marks, on something
Right.
like that, or medium to high marks, but I think it's important to get good feedback on that, on a topic like that, and then really discuss what are examples where patience was great, and what are examples where I'm impatient, because we're not just one thing. We're situationally patient,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so you can learn about that. Well, yeah, you are patient when it comes to, for instance, the kids, but you're not patient when it comes to maybe the dishes, or I don't know, something like that, or with me as your partner.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Now I can't think in broad terms. I have to get into some material there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've talked about it as almost like a human lie detector, or truth uncoverer, maybe more accurate. Because
yeah,
to your point, we how often do we, get to measure our assumptions against the way other people see us?
yeah, yeah. It is. it is the only game of its kind that I've seen. I mean, there are a lot of great games out there, and I think there's a lot of space for a lot of conversation starters. But this game um, really holds no quarter when it comes to kind of um, telling the truth and really getting at the truth of our experience. Now, truth is an ambiguous term. I mean, there is no absolute truth, right? What you're getting
Right.
are perspectives that hopefully can guide you towards a better truth,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that's what it is. This game crowdsources information as opposed to just relying on our own perception of who we think we are in
Sure.
terms of our relationships or in terms of our friendships or in terms of our beliefs. So I use the term truth loosely. The crowd doesn't have a lock on the truth. They
True.
don't necessarily know the truth. We don't necessarily know the truth ourselves, right? We're living a perspective. But I think together, you get this 360-degree view and you can have a better idea of what is really going on. And then that begs other questions. Let's say I was to give myself a 7 on the patience question and everyone else were to give me a 7. Let's say, okay, hurrah. We all see me uh, as I am. But then
Mhm.
there are other truths to explore. For instance, what would it take for me to become a 10? Or is that an ideal number? Is 7 the best number? Again, there's no truthful answer on what is
Yeah.
perfect for any individual, but one can begin to ask the question of, okay, are you happy with a 7? Would a 10 be better? Or a 9 maybe? And then
Mhm.
what is the obstacle for us to achieve that number, right? There are truths within that truth that you can begin to explore, and in the instructions I have prompts like that help uh, ask more questions, that hopefully accelerate the process of understanding and
Yeah.
connecting and personal development.
Yeah, no, you describe it well because yeah, truth is a hard word, but on the other hand, we're often locked inside an internal narrative, right? And all
Yeah,
the the faiths ideologies in the world, they almost all reinforce this idea of community, like in Buddhism, sangha, right? And the idea, I think, a lot of the idea behind that is to unlock you from this sort of single dimensional narrative and
yeah.
provide more information to the picture, that help build our self awareness.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, in any kind of personal development or spiritual journey, the group is an important factor. It's an important reflection. Now, we could argue how constructive or unconstructive that has been. I don't think that's what really matters, but the group and community help help refine our understanding of ourselves.
Mhm.
Really use that material, and this game um, really brings all that to the table.
Yeah, yeah, but often, to your point, sometimes it's not enough to have people around you because we're all too polite. So these
Yeah,
conversations, these pointed conversations to get down to the
yeah,
sort of the important, intimate things in our life, we're not we're often not having with those
yeah.
around us.
We are polite, and we don't want to disrupt our relationships very often. But that's why the game is designed the way it is anonymous feedback. Now, I've found that even though all the feedback is anonymous, by virtue of the fact that it's a game, people raise their hand and say, "Well, I gave you this for this
Yeah,
reason." So
yeah,
it's like these are things we wouldn't say in maybe in polite society, but by virtue of the fact that these um, meaningful questions show up in the form of a game, um, all of a sudden we're having those conversations.
yeah. So let's get down to it. What do you see as the main benefit of 1 to 10 and then?
Connection, really, at the end of the day. I mean, I mean, I wouldn't say there's one thing, it's about connection. Obviously, the more you understand the people around you, the better
Mhm.
you're going to be able to connect to them. You're going to have deeper, more meaningful conversations. and deeper, more meaningful connections. And it's going to open the door to addressing things addressing the problems in our lives in a constructive, meaningful way. If we understand what's your angle, who are you, what are your
Mhm.
experiences, what is the filter um, uh, that of your life that you're experiencing. I think it's all good. The more transparency we have, um, the better we'll be able to understand each other, and even our failures or our weaknesses are what kind of connect us, really. It's
Mhm.
not all about showing like, oh, I've got a great number, I'm a 10 at this, I'm a 10 at this, I'm great at this. I mean, if you do that sort of thing, if that's the kind of way you're
Right.
going to play the game, you're not going to have a great experience. It's really designed for people that are reflecting on their lives and are willing to take a
Yeah.
look at
Willing to be
themselves.
vulnerable a little bit, right?
Yeah, to be vulnerable, absolutely. And that vulnerability creates connection,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
And so it really creates connection and communication. And then ultimately, my hope is that it creates understanding for people that are on the journey of self discovery. um, what are we looking for? We want to understand ourselves. We want
Mhm.
to understand this world better so that we have an easier time of it,
Yeah.
right? So that we can navigate this world um, a bit more skillfully. And hopefully, through better connections, better communication, there's better understanding. And when there's understanding, we can begin to solve some of our issues and smooth out some of the friction that occurs in our lives so we can have a better time of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a
And
lot to ask.
ultimately,
I mean, the game isn't going to solve world hunger here or anything
sure.
like that, but it begins a conversation. Or at least my hope is that it accelerates a journey that's already happening. And I really
Right.
believe everyone's on a journey. It might be slow, and they might not be making the progress you want them to make. But I really truly believe everyone's on a journey. They benefit from conversations like this. And for people that are really into it, it can help accelerate kind of their awareness, their understanding, and hopefully their personal development.
Yeah. So it brings up a couple of questions. One is, we're talking about some pretty deep things, deep conversations. So, so what does that mean in terms of the character of the game? Is it challenging? Is it fun? Maybe
Yeah,
describe that a
good
little.
question. Very good question. Um, it is a game. It is a game in the sense that you play it and you communicate and you conversate. The way that I've both experienced the game and witnessed the game being played is that people have a lot of fun with this. Um, it's not a game for everyone. Some people absolutely do not want feedback on their lives.
Hmm.
Some people just for whatever reason,
Fair.
but I would say that's 10% of people.
Hmm.
It's a very small portion of people. But for most people, I've seen that they end up playing around two, three, four, and they just start talking and they start having fun and they start connecting. And so it's playful, it's fun, it's edgy. You're right, they are serious topics,
Hmm.
but I think when you bring the game element to it, it disarms these topics to some degree. The game's asking. I'm not asking,
Right.
and
Right.
we're on equal footing here. And we'll get out of it exactly what we put into it. And
Yeah.
if you're vulnerable and you put reality, at least your reality into it, and you've got something to discuss, I think you'll get a lot out of it. But yeah, it's fun and playful. I mean, it's not Cards Against Humanity, it's not
Right.
What Do You Meme, it's not that kind of game. But it is fun for people that are into this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I I think it's good for people to know that going in because there have been times where I've seen somebody playing the game, they thought they were going into a Cards Against Humanity or something like that, and there's a moment where it's like, whoa, this is kind of serious.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, that brings out the richness ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it turn people around, you know, like I've seen people go in one way and come out just like, wow. I've seen people go in knowing what the game is about and enjoying it as well, you know. So I mean,
Mhm.
there's been a couple, and like I said, very small percentage are just like, no, not for me, and that's okay too. There's
Yeah.
plenty of other games out there.
So speaking of that, who do you see as the audience? You've talked about people being on a journey, etc., vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, obviously I think everyone would benefit from playing a game like this. This to me it's life. I mean, this is the game of life. This it's certainly been my life to explore these questions and to find meaning in my own life and understanding in my own life. So I think it's whether, you know, whether you buy the game or somebody has bought it and you're playing it with them, I think everyone benefits. The way that I market the game is for people that are on a spiritual journey, you know,
Mhm.
that are seeking understanding, seeking personal development, that want to play a game, you know, that are not necessarily super entertained by, you know, small talk and potty
Right.
humor and stuff like that. So I think that there is a niche for this sort of thing. While I think there is a niche for it, I think most families and people and relationships would benefit from playing the game.
Yeah, agree. So what's next for 1 to 10 and then? Where do you go from here?
Yeah. So we're having fun with it. I think my friends and the people that are involved with it are enjoying it. We'd like to see more people be aware of the game, share the game, obviously play the game. Um, we've got plans for additional decks. Um, and yeah, we want to see where it goes. I don't think we have a real strong agenda per se. Obviously, we'd like it to be in every store shelf, you know,
Mhm.
at a Target or a Walmart around the world. I personally would love to see it translated into other languages
Yeah.
as a tool or an aid for people that like playing games like this and getting into deep, meaningful conversations. So, I mean, the sky's the limit from our perspective, but at the same time, we're happy to watch it kind of unfold and see where it takes us.
Yeah. Yeah, I've loved some of the feedback as people are playing it where they say, "Hey, I could use this with my work group, for example,
Yeah,
to help draw out conversations." And they can do that with some of the existing cards. Like you say, if you
yeah,
curate a deck,
yeah,
for example, it's perfect as it is. But like you say, there's potential for all kinds of other decks
yeah.
in the future.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, the questions we keep developing questions. So I mean, I've got, you know, expansion packs ready to go. I've got other games in development, but for me, these three games that we have today, the spiritual deck, the relationship deck, and the self deck, are really the cornerstones of the game. I mean, that's
Hmm.
the heart of it. I think there are ancillary things that can be explored that I think will be popular, but really at its core it's who we are through the self deck, you know, our relationship to our relationships with the relationship deck, and then you know, the spiritual deck discussing our relationship to the invisible forces around us that guide our
Hmm.
lives are really the cornerstone. I like to see those mature and develop, and then build upon that.
Absolutely. And it may be worth noting for people, the spiritual deck is not it's non-denominational, right? It doesn't
Correct.
push anybody in any direction.
It's not a religious deck
It's
per
not a
se.
religious deck. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It actually
Yeah.
explores, how people feel about the world they live in and their relationship to it,
Yeah,
as you were saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
It touches upon, certainly. I mean, certainly there are questions about religion in there and our relationship to
Hmm.
religious ideas, but it is more it is broader than that.
Yeah.
It's not a religious deck by any means.
Right. And I mentioned that because there's something, it's so hard for us to talk about our spiritual views in society because people tend to feel very strongly about them, butt heads. And I love the way the questions in that particular deck allow people to talk about those things in a way that works, in a way
Yeah.
that doesn't create that kind of conflict, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from the spiritual deck about the people around me. I thought people were far more um, spiritual or religious than they are, and conversely, I've thought that people were, more atheistic or agnostic, and I was surprised to find out. And that's good information.
Hmm.
I like, I want to know who you are, and I want to understand your world, your view of the world, and how it works, and have great conversations around it.
Hmm. I think, correct me if I say this wrong, but I think there was a question in there about whether you think you live in a hostile world or
Yeah,
a friendly world. I
yeah,
think that's a great one that really pulls
yeah,
out sort of, how people feel about the world
yeah,
they live in.
yeah. It's ideas like that.
So final thoughts in a nutshell, what would you like people to know about 1 to 10 and then?
Well, I'd like them to know that it's available. I'd like them to know um, that what a lot of what we already talked about, where it came from, what it's intended to do, and hopefully my story, the story of frustration around uh, conversations with my friends, is a story that relates, or that people can relate to, and those people have a channel to kind of spark conversations with the people around them, with their friends, their families, their partners, their lovers. Um, yeah, this is a resource, and if it can playfully uh, encourage meaningful connection and conversation, that's what I want really
It's
at the
very
end of the day.
powerful. Yeah, agree. So it's available on Amazon. It's available
Correct.
on 1 to 10 and then.com, which is
Correct.
number 1 to number 10 and
That's correct.
then.com, right?
That's correct. It's
Um,
available on both, and yeah, hopefully more and more.
and if you Google spiritual card game, it come one of the first options that
We
comes up.
are
That's
we
great.
are the game on Google for spiritual card games
Hmm.
and conscious card games. So we feel like we've carved out a bit of a, like I said, a bit of a niche here, and hopefully we'll gain in popularity.
Great. Well, thank you. And speaking personally, thanks for bringing this game into the world. It's helped
Thanks,
me, and
Malik.
appreciate it.
Appreciate your time as well.